Okay, not seriously, I'm not going to do that. Um, as a typical sort of like modern day journalist, uh, I could have spent hours and hours researching his what he's done and what he's written and what he talked about. Well, I could have just asked my friend Claude. So I've asked Claude, and if you don't mind, I'm just going to sort of go with a summary that was given and tell you a bit that I could find out about him. Now, we know that he's a highly respected journalist. He's got over 20 years of experience, and his niche is financial and political reporting. Okay, so currently the editor of The Conversation Africa. And Jabulani, if anything is this is wrong, I'm just going to blame it on AI, but then stop me and say, no, you're not.
Sure.
But from what I could establish, you still the editor of Conversation Africa
Yes.
since May 2021. We took over from Caroline Savi. But you started your journalism career with places like Financial Mail, Finance Week, Business Day, and Business Report. In 2006, appointed editor of Business Report. You served as editor-in-chief of Destiny Man. Okay, but your one major journalistic achievement was when you broke the story for the Financial Mail about SA Brewery's plans to relocate from Joburg to London. And he has written extensively on Black economic empowerment, corporate governance, and the South African developments in the corporate world in South Africa. What to me was quite interesting is he served as Chief Director of Communications at National Treasury and was appointed Head of Communications and spokesperson for the SA Reserve Bank in June 2016. And then closer to home, well, not really home, if I look at what's happening in America, it seems like people like Jerome Powell could have used your skills at this sort of shaky time in the States. Anyway, he was trained as a business journalist by the Wits Business School, and he participated in leadership exchange programs organized by the University of Pennsylvania, 1996. And in 2001, he was awarded a Nieman Fellowship at Harvard University. He was part of the Black Economic Empowerment Commission, established in 1998 and chaired by Cyril Ramaphosa, which reported to then President Thabo Mbeki in July 2001. And that report became the basis of the BEE Act. And that is sort of my start. Now, if all that is correct, Jabulani, you can, I'm going to hand it over to you. And welcome. Thanks for actually spending the time apart to speak to us. I think we're in a situation where we know, we have got that realization that we have to listen to every little bit of wisdom. Not that it necessarily is going to be that sort of key that opens it, but it may just be. And it may just be that stuff that we've tried before did not work because we didn't try it in the correct way. And with a bit of more insights from people like you, we're going to go back and say, oh, no, we just have to try a bit harder. But okay, yeah, thanks a lot. And it's all over to you.
Thanks, Anton. Let me say we had a very interesting discussion, I think, which was an in-person meeting with the Gauteng, your Gauteng colleagues. I learned a lot because it was a two-way kind of discussion, kind of free-flowing. I made a few opening kind of statements to try and frame the discussion. So I'm going to follow the same format today as well, and then hopefully everybody will come to the party and we can kind of have this conversation about what's happening to the media, and particularly, obviously, and more the more relevant part is community media. So basically, I mean, I think the best way of looking at it is to cast our minds back a little bit into the history of the media. That historically, media had two kind of pillars to it. One is you build an audience, which is the journalism, where the journalism part comes in. Then you market that audience to advertisers or potential advertisers. That's the commercial part of it. You generate advertising income. which historically used to be a big chunk of the money that a media house or a publisher would make. Then the copy sales, either through single copy sale, copy sales or subscriptions, was a much smaller, at least in the South African market. Elsewhere in the world, in the US, publishers used to kind of perhaps make up to 20%, if not slightly more, from subscriptions or copy sales, at least some publications, right? But typically your advertising would be in the order of 85 to 90% of your revenue. And then obviously the big chunk of your cost will be journalism. In other words, it will be in the order of your 35% of your operating costs will be the cost of hiring journalists. And then there's printing and distribution, which makes up the second kind of largest chunk of your operating cost. Well, then comes technology, the internet. So it first attacks the commercial side of things because it wipes out that advertising kind of revenue. For newspapers, it starts with classifieds first, where people used to kind of list in the classified section of the Star newspaper in Johannesburg, a second-hand fridge or a second-hand washing machine that I want to sell. Suddenly comes the internet. I can put that on the internet for almost nothing. So the Star will lose that revenue. So the advertising goes, and then obviously once your advertising goes, which is your biggest revenue generator, you cut back on journalism, right? Well, we're now at a stage where technology is actually going for journalism. Big time. The rise of the so-called influencers and news creators goes directly to kind of head on with journalism, because the younger audiences, as research will show, are increasingly relying on news creators and influencers for what they kind of describe as news. They no longer they rely less and less. In fact, they don't even go to your kind of media outlets or your traditional media outlets for that. So technology is now going directly for journalism, right? AI, artificial intelligence, basically, I mean, newsrooms across the world are beginning or have been using AI to write articles, right? So if you look at Bloomberg, Reuters, kind of the so-called newswire services, where speed is of the essence. If a company makes an announcement and you want to make sure that that announcement is quickly available to your subscribers who are in the financial markets, there's nothing quicker than artificial intelligence. That used to be the job of a journalist, right? So technology is now going for the journalism part in a big way of this of the two pillars, because the advertising pillar obviously has been weakened, if not destroyed, almost completely. Well, you can still get advertising, but not in the same kind of the traditional way. So, right now, what does that mean then for if you're running a community media, right? It basically means that you no longer have kind of these two pillars, because they've just both been taken out, or well, at least the journalism part one is being taken out by technology directly. Indirectly, I mean, journalism got weakened because when media houses lost the traditional advertising revenue, obviously they cut back on newsrooms. So a lot of the journalism jobs disappeared. But the role of the journalist itself today is being challenged by by technology, which has enabled the so-called news creators. News creators basically are individuals who create and distribute content through socials or social media platforms or video networks, and have impact on debates, whether it's on news or current events, right? Across a number of topics, right? And influencers are individuals with a large following on social media, and they often, well, in fact, they post about news, politics, and social issues, right? And both influencers and news creators, I mean, they are kind of personality-driven content, and it blurs the line between that traditional line that used to be there between news and opinion, right? Influencers and news creators just blur that. I mean, they mix the two, so much so that often it becomes difficult to tell what is news and what is opinion. But it for younger audiences, well, even for kind of older audiences as well, they go with that. Interestingly, you would find that your traditional media often reports what influencers and news creators are saying on social media. That in itself becomes news on some of the traditional media platforms. You would kind of read an article on News 24 saying that this so and so posted something that says the following, right? So which, in other words, giving it kind of that additional pair of legs in terms of audiences that it wouldn't have had if it had stayed kind of as just commentary by a news influencer or a news creator on a social media platform. So interestingly, that's become kind of a source of news in itself for your traditional media. Well, now the question that all of this raises is, well, if you're running a community media outlet, well, then what do you do, right? Because if you have a community media outlet, well, who is your community that you are serving or servicing with your outlet, whether it's print or online, or if you're doing video, Who is that audience? Are you meeting their requirements, right? Can you take advantage of these new developments where, one, you can use AI to write some of the articles? Is that an option? If it's not an option, well, how are you going to compete? Can you tap into someone who's an influencer in your geography of focus, or someone who's a news creator, and see, how do you cooperate with them? How, in essence, how do you become relevant to your community or to the geography that you serve in this environment where there are all these challenges? You are not getting the same amount of advertising, or it's harder to get the same amount or type of advertising that you may have got 20, 30 years ago. You are competing with kind of these social media platforms that are providing kind of a publishing platform for influencers and news creators. Secondly, somebody else may come up and use artificial intelligence just to generate, to write articles, which then they can put out there on their own. So how do you structure or restructure yourself in this in this environment? I'm also saying this, I mean, being mindful that there are other sets of challenges that community media outlets face. You trying to get advertising from local government, municipalities or provincial governments, and you run up against the politics in its various kind of manifestations, corruption as well, and all of those other challenges. But there are these other kind of broader ones that I've just set out. So, right. So let me stop here and kind of let's have a chat or have a discussion and see how have you been dealing with some of these issues? Is there anything that new that you guys are trying out there in relation to either working with influencers or news creators? How are you using AI? If you are already thinking about using AI, and how do you think it might help in this situation?
So if there are questions and you sort of raise your hands or just start, maybe sort of Jabulani, while sort of we're waiting for the others to sort of go through their notes. Starting off with, you said the old model.
Yeah.
I mean, excluding looking specifically at places like the Europe and the US, there was like a 20% reliance on subscriptions for copy sales. What is the situation? Well, I don't know what the situation is in South Africa or historically, but what is the situation now? Because I'm like reading of, I think the French El Monde, even Washington Post, which basically said that for the first time in like probably more than a century, they are able to expand on the news or on the journalism component because the subscription income has become to such an extent that it's now possible for them. But I'm just sort of leaving the question, what is the situation now in the US and Europe in terms of that percentage of subscription, online specifically, not for the printed product? And what do you think the situation currently is in South Africa?
Well, if you take the Financial Times as an example, it now has more online subscribers than on print. It's still doing both print and online subscription. And like the New York Times, like the Wall Street Journal, and like the Economist, they still offer that dual package where you can subscribe for both. Get a print and delivered to you, and then obviously you can also get an online version, or you can just go and subscribe for an online package only. I mean, I subscribe for just an online version of the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the New Yorker, that sort of thing. So I don't do print. So, but the Financial Times, for example, does make a decent amount of money out of its online subscriptions, right? The question is around accounting, because when a media outlet says, well, we are now making money out of an online subscription, are they taking all of the costs involved? Because if you still have a print product, you still have the cost of print, and you're using for example, your journalists on both online and on print, right? So how do you allocate costs? That's the one thing that's becoming a little bit more difficult to work out, because you don't get that split, particularly with the companies that are listed on stock exchanges. I mean, the New York Times is still listed on the New York Stock Exchange. So they publish a set of financial accounts, but it's very difficult then to split those costs. In other words, because they just hire journalists and they work across both platforms, right? So now how do you split those costs? So if they're saying, for example, if the New York Times is saying that they're making decent money out of online, yes, but once you take the journalism costs, is that still profitable, or is it profitable if you don't allocate the full costs of of producing journalism to that? But clearly, I mean, the evidence will show that a number of international media outlets are making money. In other words, they've been able to migrate a substantial portion of their historic kind of subscribers for the print product onto the online kind of product, right? And in fact, some have attracted new audiences for their online offering, right? The New York Times has a very interesting model for its offering, because it's offering you, there's a sports thing which you subscribe to separately, right? Then they've gone big on games and puzzles. So you pay for that separately. And then obviously you get your basic news stroke analysis kind of package that you can just buy on its own, right? Whereas the New York Times, no, the Financial Times, I think, goes in a different direction. You just subscribe for the for the package. The Wall Street Journal as well, kind of you get the full package when you go online and you subscribe for the online version. So all these different approaches. Which one will, in the end, be the most successful? Is it the New York Times version, where they've kind of it's an agglomeration model where you actually add all of these things and then you price them separately? In the old days, I mean, those crossword puzzles will just come as part of your normal kind of newspaper subscription. But the New York Times has kind of developed an entire package of puzzles and crossword kind of stuff that they offer, and other games that you can kind of buy. And they've actually invested quite huge amounts of money, and they've bought companies that have added to that. They've done the same with sports, which they offer as a separate package, right?
Thanks, Jabulani. It's sort of waiting for any more sort of hands and questions. And you can, even if you've got questions, you want to sort of post it in the chat, that would also be fine. From my side, let's, if you continue, because I think it's quite interesting. Yeah, you're obviously a Wordle player. If you sort of like refer to the puzzles and the stuff of the New York Times, but closer to home, when the situation is quite bleak, because you explained how it gets the advertising income sort of sector gets eroded. Yes, and you refer to, like, we're up against all sorts of challenges, which include like politics in terms of, yes, the presumed gatekeepers do not want to utilize media that will be critical. It's much easier for them to go for social media, which is not like, it's just repeats what they're saying. But now, what would be part of the solutions for local media? If subscription in South Africa obviously is like a very difficult model to follow, it's not very successful. I don't know if you've got some insights in the Media 24s and some of the others that utilize that, but it's a difficult one. And advertising is also quite difficult. Your opinions on where it's heading to? What is the future for local journalism? And then we'll get to Austin. Sorry, I see there's a hand. But let me leave you with that question, then we can move on to Austin.
Yeah, look, elsewhere in the world, but also across the African continent, obviously there's funding of media outlets through philanthropy. In other words, you can see that in South Africa with Daily Maverick. I mean, they get philanthropy money, and they get individual donations. In other words, right? So the challenge with individual donations in South Africa is that if you're not registered with SARS as a non-profit, there's a specific forgotten the terminology for it now, But basically, if you meet that criteria, it means basically from a tax point of view, you get a status. If I donate, let's say 200 Rand a month to your outlet, and you meet that SARS criteria, it means that you then at the end of the tax year issue me with a tax certificate for which I can claim some tax deductions from SARS, right? Now
Section 18A.
Yeah?
Section
Yes.
18A.
Yeah. So to qualify for that benefit, the criteria is obviously it's clearly spelled out. So if you're running a community media outlet, it will then mean that you have to set it up as a non-profit entity, which means you can't make money, in other words, out of it. If you're trading in a commercial sense, then you wouldn't be able to qualify for that benefit, right, from SARS. So that immediately then limits the number of or the amount of individual donations that you can raise, right? But individual donations are a possibility, right, to explore, but then it has an impact in terms of how you structure your operation. In other words, it can't be a commercial entity and then qualify for that section for that benefit from a tax point of view. But there is philanthropy money. Unfortunately, in South Africa, a lot of the philanthropy funding is targeted at what's called investigative journalism, right? So Daily Maverick will get money, Amapungane will get money from kind of large foundations on that basis that they are holding those in power to account, right? Because that holding those in power to account is clearly defined if you're doing investigative journalism, because you are investigating corruption, you are investigating kind of failures by the various layers of government and associated state institutions to deliver public services, right? So, and then these large philanthropy organizations will then kind of give you money on that basis. So if you are a community media outlet, well, the question then becomes, well, can you do that? Investigative journalism can be quite expensive in the sense that some of the investigation, well, you need first to have a team of people who can investigate these things, kind of procurement, all of that stuff, and other deals by the various layers of government. And then that can take some time, right? So it's time consuming, right? But philanthropy money is a possibility, but it does have its own challenges, right? Commercial entities, I mean, can Standard Bank, for example, which sponsors journalism, can Sanlam, which sponsors journalism, can they be potential sources to tap, to say, well, we are community media, and we are closest to our communities? Well, the first question hurdle I think you're going to run up against is they might turn around and say, well, show us some evidence, how close are you to these communities, or, that sort of thing. So which might make it a bit of a challenge. Commercially, I'm not talking about advertising. I'm talking about grant money or kind of contributions that potentially commercial entities can make to community media. So there are possibilities, but there are hurdles, right? How you kind of overcome those hurdles might be key to kind of dealing with this. There is money also, obviously, as you would know, that came via Google I don't know how easy it is to access that money. I'm not close to that subject at all. So there is the Google initiative, and then there's the stuff that also happened with the Competition Commission, the outcome of that Competition Commission investigation. I don't also know how easy it will be to access some of that money, but those are all kind of possibilities to explore. Look, when it comes to individual donations, there might be people who are willing to give you 200 rand here, 500 rand here, without kind of wanting to get a tax benefit out of it. So there are people who might be willing to do that, but finding them and identifying them, that might take quite some effort and time.
Thanks. But yeah, sadly, it's mostly philanthropy. But let's go, Austin, and then Mahmoud. Yeah, Austin, if you can start.
Thanks, Anton. Thank you very much, Jabulani, for the insights, and greeting colleagues, compliments. Yeah, I will deal with the challenges that we're facing and also maybe possible solutions. The number one challenge that we have is that most of us are small commercial publications. Maybe community publications have got the support of their communities to be able to continue to print. And mostly we go out free of charge. And going out free and facing the printing costs actually makes it really hard, because you might find that you intend to go out weekly, you end up going out maybe fortnightly or monthly. So the reason why you hold on to the hard copy is because of government advertising. Businesses, small businesses, they are not yet educated about advertising in a hard copy. They run to social media, and some government departments, unfortunately, they are now clinging on to Facebook to post their things on Facebook, and then they think it's done, it's out there, the communities are going to get it, but they don't understand that the communities that we serve, they've got a problem of data. They don't always see things that are online, but a hard copy, it will stay there and the advert will be there, even if those who live in rural areas and so forth, if they take it to the loo, it will still be there. They will be able to see the advert. So we do have websites, and we was assisted to build websites. Some put money to have those websites, but the government policy at the moment is that they cannot advertise online. They only advertise on a hard copy, and then you must deliver the hard copy to them, which is quite a challenge, because if government would actually support going online, it will become easier for us to focus online, and then you produce maybe those once in a time or in a while hard copies, depending on the situation. But we are forced to stick with the hard copy. So online, there are a few solutions. I think it will need us to go back to the drawing board and have and build up our cooperatives and some cartels, so that we approach certain institutions to partner with them, because there are institutions that want to get their stories out there, and they need a concrete partnership, not just one publication, but several publications coming together and saying, we will be able to cover your media when you issue statements or whatever, or events, we'll cover that and we'll publish it across these media platforms, which have got such a reach, you know. I think that can maybe assist us, because on social media, we are there, we are present. I know that Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, they are able now to pay if you post content that has got a lot of following and a lot of views. But when it comes to news, you really have to have a hot story for you to get a lot of clicks on that story, you know, or on that watch, a lot of people watching that video. So it's really like a cat and mouse situation because you don't know what will go viral or what will be able to make you to be paid. Like Kanyesa, we are monetized on Facebook, we're monetized on Instagram, on YouTube, but the money is not enough to cover even a single print in a month. So
Yeah.
it's still really a challenge. So considering also that the communities that we serve have got a problem of data. So the solution will be actually to partner with organizations that can assist us to get our communities to have access to some amount of data per day, you know, for free. And that's actually what I'm advocating for. You get an umbrella Wi-Fi and people can tap into that Wi-Fi, maybe get 30 minutes a day, you know. But there will be some conditions, they must watch some adverts and so forth. That can actually bring local advertisers to be on the landing page of that Wi-Fi system. And also, it can also assist to say, it can assist for, let's say, municipalities and so forth, they can be on the landing page and they can have a budget set aside to actually finance that, because I believe I've spoken to some companies that can actually put that infrastructure, but it's quite expensive. So maybe that's where the Google Fund comes in and so forth. And then the MTTA, you know, the AIP, they are really assisting us a lot, you know, to us to fund like the MTTA, to fund the AIP, to source funding like the Google Fund and so forth. But we need to be able to have a working solution. GCIS is still slipping through the fingers. And they keep talking about this 30%, 30%, but the year goes through, we don't even see a single cent. So I think the MTTA, the AIP should assist us on that part. And then we have to deal with our local municipalities, our districts, and the provincial departments, because it looks like they don't quite understand the struggle that we're going through. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. The one other avenue that you guys should explore, because that will talk to the issue of data, is ICASA. So as the association, you should engage ICASA, because ICASA at the moment, I think, if I remember correctly, is busy developing regulations around the expiry of data bundles, right? Now, that's quite critical for your low income kind of segment, because if I get money only when I get my pension as a retiree, or kind of somebody who's on a social grant, or somebody who's receiving one of the other social grants, that comes in once a month, so more at the end of the month. So if I get that, when I get that, and then I buy a data bundle, say from one of the service providers, and that thing is going to expire in 10 days or 15 days or whatever, it means thereafter, when I no longer, my cash flow is very low, I'm left without any kind of possibility of data, because once that data bundle expires, because all of these data bundles come with kind of expiry dates, 30 days, some are 5 days, 7 days, some are 10 days. So I was trying to buy data for a relative the other day, so I had to look at all these kind of expiry dates. So I think if the association can engage ICASA, or at least keep as close as possible to the ICASA processes, and see if is there any assistance in terms of interventions or regulations that could help alleviate that data problem? in communities. So that's one. The second one is the Gauteng government many years ago used to talk about trying to provide Wi-Fi in a number of community places or in communities. But it will appear that that initiative collapsed at some point because there's nothing like that. I think also the Johannesburg municipality as well spoke about something similar. I haven't had anything since then. So there always these promises, I think, from the government side. Obviously, as you point out, GCIS is is a write-off. Well, it has no. I don't know if they've appointed the head, a permanent head of GCIS. So there are issues there. So maybe on the government side as well, the possibly areas of engagement, maybe directly also with the Department of Communications rather than and see if you could make some headway there. So the point I'm trying to get at is the association just needs to lobby, develop a lobbying strategy, not only lobbying government, lobbying regulators, relevant regulators like ICASA, but also some of the private sector institutions. I mean, is there something you could engage the business unity South Africa around to see if there could be some commitments from the business sector in terms of how they could support the small commercial kind of media entities that serve communities that are left out by your traditional media outlets, right?
Thanks, Jabulani. Mahmoud?
Yeah, thanks, Anton. And Jabulani, in the earlier part of the presentation, it sounded a bit nostalgic because you were talking about the early days. And I remember at that time, Craigslist preceded Facebook.
Yeah.
And the disruptions that have occurred since then have been multiple because we now know about AI, but it initially, I think the first disruption, which was a positive one, came with email. And that was before even the year 2000. But more about current days, you made the point about funding from Google and so forth. And I think maybe Anton would be in a better position to describe the environment in which this funding is occurring. It is at present, there's been funding allocated from Google, and AIP is part of that process. So like I said, Anton can maybe give you some feedback on that. But just in terms of how generally community media is navigating the current challenges, to my mind, if I were to kind of encapsulate the broader experience of the typical AIP member, it is to carve out a unique solution for each publisher. Each publisher has to carve out its own unique solution. There isn't a one-fits-all solution. If I can quickly tell you a few things about what we're doing, because I think that is one question that you asked, what are we doing to navigate the current media environment? We are a registered nonprofit. We have a approval from SARS to issue Section 18A certification. We can legitimately receive donations from our audience, and yet the environment remains very, very challenging. So the one principle, I think there are many, but I think the one principle that I can identify that has always been an evergreen one in media, in news, particularly in community journalism, and that is content is king. So I've used that, and in various ways, we tried a number of different options and number of different ways of generating revenue because the old advertising model has failed and so forth. So the one thing that we're doing is we're trying to prioritize the repackaging of news. So if you have news, and you know it's independent news, you know it is independent journalism, you know you're doing something to do investigative journalism, even that isn't sufficient to secure survival, to build an audience that is big enough in order to attract advertisers, whether they are in print, if you're doing print and online, and you're on social media. Even that isn't a guarantee that original good journalism and hard news content and investigative journalism is going to do the trick for you to secure your revenue and to keep you in business. So a lot of creative ways has to be looked at in order for you to repackage your content. So the one thing that we're doing, and because we happen to be just a little bit about our title, we are called Muslim Views. So we're the leading faith-based publication for the Muslim community in South Africa. But because our audience is kind of conventionally so narrow and so small in South Africa, we have put potentially a international audience as well, because Muslims are all over the world. Yet to be able to say that we want to be creative and package content in a way that makes it attractive for an advertiser, we have to look for these opportunities. And one we're busy with right now is Shoprite Checkers has traditionally advertised with us for about 20 years. They take 2 full pages in our print edition. That is great, but it doesn't sustain us because we still shrinking in our page count, in our print order, because the costs are rising and the cost of journalism, this kind of revenue doesn't sustain those costs. So what I'm working at is now a relationship with our key advertiser, Shoprite Checkers, and offering them something beyond just the print advert. In other words, can we do something really different other than print in order to give you better value, to give you insights into a local community, news content, cultural content, religious content that appeals to the audience and that matches the commercial objectives of the advertiser. So we have, for example, the month of Ramadan, which is coming up on the 18th of February. So we're packaging something for them along those lines, and we're trying to build these kinds of creative offerings to our advertisers to build unique solutions. And I think that to me would be perhaps a way to go for most AIP members. That's just a very quick answer to what I thought was a very broad question that you asked.
No, that sounds very interesting. I mean, at least in your case, I mean, you've got a clearly kind of a well-defined sort of audience or community that you are serving. You know, it's quite neatly kind of segmented. Obviously, how you reach it is another matter, but it's quite nicely, I think, packaged community.
Anton, are you there?
Yep, no, I'm still here.
Okay, I'm not sure if any other hands are up, but I mean, maybe you can take the discussion further.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. So it's a broad, we're all sort of searching for unique solutions. None of them really work, but none of them also don't work. So it's not as if we can scrap some of it and say it's not working. It's like philanthropy. There's an option, advertising. But I want to throw a slightly different sort of curveball at you, Jabulani, and that's on terms of taxation. When a lot of the fund or the income that we've lost has been to players like Facebook or Meta, Google, companies that don't pay tax in this country, do not employ anyone in any of our areas. So their contribution to community is just about zero. Well, they can obviously argue that yes, we're providing communication technology and the WhatsApp, which I mean that is an argument. But in general, they do not contribute to the tax base of the country. They do not contribute to significant employment. Do you foresee a scenario in South Africa where that might change, where these companies would be taxed? Also, the argument would be that what is in certain instances happen is nothing less than large-scale dumping. And in any sort of scenario where there's large-scale dumping, government has to intervene. and put in measures to try and at least sort of balance out the market. But yeah, let me sort of throw that at you and sort of get your opinion on it.
Look, it's a challenge for governments, how you tax these entities, because how they structure their businesses. So if let me give you an example. What one multinational will do is they'll go and set up a holding company. In other words, let's say you take Apple for example. It's a very good example. So if you have a company that owns all of the Apple trademarks that's registered in Ireland, for argument's sake, and it only pays 15% or 10% corporate tax in Ireland, right? And it has probably just hires, probably have a couple of administrative people that are based there just to do the admin, right? And all of the transactions with the rest of the world for Apple get done via this very low tax jurisdiction, right? So and then the way they'll structure their business is that anybody else in the rest of the world who that they are trading with has to pay the trademark fee to that entity in Ireland, that would be done at very kind of low tax rates, right? To try and keep track of that as a government or as a revenue collection agency or SARS is a nightmare. So what governments have agreed, or ministers of finance have agreed, working with their tax collection agencies, is some kind of cooperation around sharing information about you and I as individual taxpayers, but also about corporate the corporates that are operating around the world, to try and see if they could, when they can share this information, then they could start taxing these entities better. The one major agreement, I think, which came via the G20 about a couple of years back, was an agreement, and the OECD was in an agreement on it's not a flat tax, but it's a basic level of taxation that most countries have signed up to. I think it's 15% tax, kind of for all corporates, basically. And the attempt there is to try and reduce these loopholes where you would have one country having very low kind of tax rates, and then companies then maneuver and restructure their businesses in such a manner that they can only kind of pay no tax at all, or pay very little tax in one part of the world, because they are washing their money through their these tax very low tax jurisdictions. So it's depending, I mean, on how global cooperation pans out into the future, it may be possible to start having your kind of Facebook owners paying tax in countries where they have a footprint. Because clearly, I mean, if you look at the number of South Africans who are using Facebook, I mean, there is something there, and advertisers do advertise on the Facebook platform, and Facebook South Africa should be getting some revenue on which they should be paying tax like everybody else, right? But a lot of the ability to tax these entities, if you are a small country, depends on global cooperation. Particularly the big countries, does the EU and the US agree that we should all countries should at least have a minimum kind of tax rates for corporates? Because if your big economies don't agree, then you are starved as the smaller countries. South Africa, I mean, as an economy relative to the rest of the continent, it's a big economy, but you know, in relative to the rest of the world, we probably number 30, number 31, somewhere there. You know, so we're not as big as we often like to believe. Although in some instances, well, historically at least, not today. Historically, I mean, South Africa has punched above its weight on a number of economic issues, but we are still a small economy relatively. I mean, we're not big. Yeah. Plus the fact that we haven't been growing much in the last 15 years or so. Interestingly, I mean, as an aside, there was some calculations that were done and published by Investec that showed that if the South African economy had continued or had grown at an average of 4% since 2010, and we've been growing way below that. In fact, we've probably been averaging below 2% since then. But Investec's calculations show that last year, the South African economy, the GDP would have been worth just over 11 trillion rands. It was at 7. So that gap between those two numbers, that's just an aside. Yeah, so a lot on taxation, I think, or the ability of a country to tax some of these multinationals that have become very powerful depends on the effectiveness of global cooperation. And in addition, also, it depends on the quality and the effectiveness of your revenue agency. You know, if SARS is weakened, you know, you really can't collect revenue.
Okay, thanks, Jabulani. I think we've got a few minutes left. Normally it's like an hour session. If there are any other questions, just fire away, just put up your hand. I'm going to sort of summarize part of what you said. If I'm correct, an organization such as AIP, one of the solutions that you propose is lobbying. Lobbying, whether it's at GCIS, whether it's lobbying to get zero-rated data, and also lobbying for more grants, like the Google grants and like a number of others, because I think most of us who's been in business for quite a few decades realize that where we previously were proudly not reliant on philanthropy, the situation has changed. We have to realize that journalism is it's an essential commodity. It's a general good, and because of that, you often have to treat it like any other essential service. But yes, if you want to sort of maybe just end with a summary of your advice to small publishers.
Well, two points. I mean, the first one, it became quite an interesting point of discussion with the Gauteng guys towards the end of last year, because is the issue of cooperation. In other words, there's a lot of value in 2-3 small publishers agreeing that we can do these specific things together rather than do them as individuals, right? Because if you are running a small operation, sometimes certain things the cost of doing certain things becomes very expensive. But suddenly, if the 2, 3, 4, if you can reach agreement, you can do something, right? I'm not even talking about kind of working together at an association level. In other words, as the entire association, because as Mahmoud was saying, you know, there are huge differences, I think, in terms of the association members and the type of entities that they run. So in some instances, it might just be easier for a few to come together on a specific project, not in general terms, not saying, oh yeah, we're gonna cooperate. Is there something like, for example, if you're gonna apply for Google funding, right? Are you going to do it as an individual kind of entity, or do you cluster together as kind of 3-4 entities and say, okay, right, we're going to target that funding because it's going to help us as these 4 businesses achieve the following things. You might have a better chance of success going there but that's an assessment you need to make on your own. I mean, it's not something that can be predetermined. Then the second thing is around lobbying. So the other thing, I mean, around clustering or cooperation is around looking for advertising. I mean, is something you could do, that you can have a look at. Then lobbying in South Africa has historically, I think, been undervalued. Sometimes people run away from lobbying because they think, oh, yeah, if you lobby, you're then distorting government policies, or you may be seen to be doing that. But lobbying basically is quite important globally in terms of policy making, because by lobbying sort of parliament, when there's a piece of legislation or policy before parliament that as an association you deem to most likely have either a negative or most likely to have a positive impact on your operations, basically means you're there to share information with the policymaker about a part of your business that they don't know about, that they don't understand. Because the guys who sit in parliament or even government officials who write policies, they don't know some of the challenges that you are talking about or that you face as community media. So by just sharing that experience with them and saying to them, well, if you proceed with your proposed policy in this direction, this is going to be the impact on community media. It's going to be very negative. Basically, you're going to wipe us out. So we would suggest or we propose that maybe we find a middle of the road sort of framing of that policy. Lobbying is also helping ICASA, for example, because remember on the radio, even though ICASA doesn't directly deal with print media, it deals with broadcasting, right? So there are some community broadcasters as well. But in this instance, I was talking more about ICASA in relation to data, because if data is one of the big hurdles for any transition that community media might want to make to online publishing or to even publishing on kind of social media platforms, then ICASA is the right vehicle to engage, to see, is there something that ICASA could do that might reduce that hurdle, that might ease that burden? Is it kind of the data bundle kind of expiration dates? Might that help? Is there something else when ICASA licenses new telecoms operators that can be done to help improve that? Obviously, government is policy. GCIS is more on the implementation side as well. MTDA as well is worth lobbying, engaging, not so much as individual kind of operators, because they would fund you as an individual business, but engaging them at an association level, whether it's as a provincial structure or as a national structure, right? So I'll say those two things in my view. I mean, looking at where you can cooperate, either to reduce some of the costs of doing certain projects, or to improve potential revenue kind of opportunities, and then lobbying, because lobbying is very key or can be key, in fact, in terms of reducing your costs and opening up new avenues for community media.
Well, I think sort of that wraps it up. This is one of the sad things about a digital or like an online conference. If it was a physical conference, we could have organized you a box of chocolates or something like that. And now it's not possible, so you will just have to accept our appreciation. And
Yes.
you were our first guest for the year. You're welcome if you're sort of interested in what we do. We try and meet every 2 weeks, normally on a Thursday morning at 10 o'clock, and then a variety of subjects that we address. And it's all about sustainability, trying to find that way forward. And I think the past year has been extremely difficult, but we're still here and we're still fighting. And I think that in itself is a huge achievement. And one of the nice things about AIP is that you meet these incredible publishers. If you look at their situation, and you cannot believe that they keep on publishing in their circumstances. But they are, and they're still here, and we're going to be here hopefully in the next year. So, but thanks for your time. Thanks for everyone who attended.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much. Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Anton. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.